Why do we write? I mean, really, what drives us to take the time and capture our thoughts and pin them down like butterflies on display? Though it might not always seem like it, people write because they want to accomplish one of three things. They want to entertain you, they want to inform you, or they want to persuade you. That's it. Pretty much all writing boils down to one of those three things, or a combination of them. A lot of the times, the entertainment gets all the glory because we love stories. Like, novelists are going to be more well-known than essayists and poets, probably because they give us more of that entertainment value that we want. But the world turns because of information writing. We only know what we know because somebody had the good sense to keep track of all the stuff and let other people know about it. But even that would be almost worthless if somebody hadn't figured out how to persuade other people. That ability to persuade somebody through your writing is the very reason that the pen is mightier than the sword. It can topple kingdoms and devastate worlds. Some writing will focus on only one of those specific purposes, but some of the best writing does all three at the same time. You can entertain people through your word choice, and you can persuade people by being reasonable and logical, and you can inform people through a list of facts. But today, we want to focus on storytelling as a way to achieve your purpose. It's all about you and your story today as we talk about the power of anecdotes on this week's Words from the Muck. An anecdote is a short story, and I mean really short, not one of those like 20 to 30 page like fiction things that you read in class. An anecdote is something that can be retold quickly, like in a couple of paragraphs, or even fewer than that. They are quick enough to drop into conversations at work or at school, but anecdotes are important because they're true personal stories. By pulling on a writer's life, anecdotes can set up pins of purpose that the author will knock down later on. As an example, in Scott Russell Sanders' essay, Under the Influence, Sanders considers alcoholism through several different lenses. He thinks about the way alcoholic characters are made comical in our media, and he reflects on his religious upbringing and the way the church highlights the endangerment of the soul that can happen through substance abuse. Throughout the essay, though, Sanders returns to snippets of his childhood, moments when he recognized his own father's drinking problem. These anecdotes bring the pathos into Sanders' essay, making us feel the discomfort, the pain, and the struggling to understand why his father was the way he was. One of the more powerful anecdotes comes toward the end of the essay. Sanders is married with a kid of his own, and after decades of addiction, anger, manipulation, guilt, and confusion, Sanders' father finally got sober, stayed away from the stuff for 15 years. But it didn't last. I visited my parents in Mississippi with our 4-year-old daughter. Mother had been too distraught to warn me about the return of the demons. So when I climbed out of the car that bright July morning and saw my father napping in the hammock, I felt uneasy. And when he lurched upright and blinked his bloodshot eyes and greeted us in a syrupy voice, I was hurled back into childhood. "What's the matter with Papa?" our daughter asked. "Nothing," I said. "Nothing." Like a child again, I pretended not to see him in his stupor, and behind my phony smile, I grieved. What does this do for his writing? Sanders could write an essay about alcoholism with enough facts and research to fill several books, but information by itself isn't always very compelling. More than that, it wouldn't really express what it means to have an alcoholic father. Sanders' anecdotes do more to inform us than the facts ever could. His stories, short as they are, put us in his shoes just long enough for us to feel a little bit of his life. These are the moments that will stick with the reader more than statistics will. The use of anecdotes as a shortcut to experience is used by many authors. When Amy Tan explores language in her essay, Mother Tongue, she explains that she not only speaks English, she uses all the Englishes I grew up with. Tan's discussion of language takes us through a series of thoughts and stories about how her language at home was different than what was expected of her in school. And she claims that the way English was spoken at home by her mother is what shaped her perspectives and her writing. To show what that looks like and to help you understand what she means, Tan takes us through at least 5 different anecdotes in her essay. Just last week I was walking down the street with my mother, and I again found myself conscious of the English I was using. The English I do use with her. We were talking about the price of new and used furniture, and I heard myself saying this: "Not waste money that way." My husband was with us as well, and he didn't notice any switch in my English, and then I realized why. It has become the language of intimacy, a different sort of English that relates to family talk, the language I grew up with. It's clear when reading Tan's work or listening to one of her talks that she's a great writer and communicator, so it's a little odd, apparently for her as well, to see or hear her speak in this way. But what she does with anecdotes like this is puts her reader in a specific context to make them more open to her ideas. Her stories here ask us to think about the way we speak with family or friends and how that differs from the way we speak in another context, like school or church. She doesn't specifically tell us, think about how you talk with your mom, and then think about how you talk with your boss. But the implication is still there. And she does it so quickly, and that's the power of the anecdote. Establish a context, and make a point. But also notice how her story is a springboard into her thoughts on this issue. We are informed by her anecdotes and entertained in many cases, and we're persuaded to consider the different Englishes we all use and how the most correct version isn't always the best or the most effective. Storytelling can be the primary method of persuasion, layering story on top of story to continually bring the reader to a better understanding of your perspective. Chimamanda Adichie, in one of the best TED Talks ever, like seriously, go check it out. She starts with this.
I'm a storyteller, and I would like to tell you a few personal stories about what I like to call the danger of the single story.
Adichie's talk asks us to remember that people and places are complex, and they are always more than you think you know. The way she does this is by telling personal stories of misunderstandings and unintentional stereotypes. For instance, Adichie tells us about when she left Nigeria to go to college in the United States, and how her roommate was perplexed.
My American roommate was shocked by me. She asked where I had learned to speak English so well, and was confused when I said that Nigeria happened to have English as its official language. She asked if she could listen to what she called my tribal music, and was consequently very disappointed when I produced my tape of Mariah Carey.
The reason these stories are so important to her argument is that most Americans would be in the same boat as the roommate. Through this little anecdote, we are called out on how we see an entire continent and how simple our ideas are. Like Tan, Adichie has informed us on the situations she has encountered, and you can tell by the audience response that there is some entertainment value going on here. But she has a persuasive purpose as well. She wants us to consider people more complexly and places more holistically.
I've always felt that it is impossible to engage properly with a place or a person without engaging with all of the stories of that place and that person. The consequence of the single story is this: it robs people of dignity. It makes our recognition of our equal humanity difficult. It emphasizes how we are different rather than how we are similar.
To be clear, using your life as evidence isn't always a valid option. For one, you might not have a great story to support your ideas. Like, let's say you were writing about the suffering of the poverty-stricken, but you've never actually, suffered. Do not sit there and talk about how you missed lunch one day and your tummy was all grumbly and you just, the suffering of others is so real to you now. But what you can do is research and find stories that can help support your ideas. It's also important to remember that some genres of writing just aren't that interested in you, the person. Analyzing literature or typing up a science report doesn't leave a lot of room for you to talk about your dog and that one time he threw up in your aunt's shoes. And that's okay. Sometimes your writing needs to be encased in the research or in the literature that you're asked to consider. And in those cases, you give your ideas without the context of your life, but with the context of what you've read. Anecdotes are a great way to connect to your audiences, and they work by giving flesh to the skeletons of information, making the stats human and the research personal. And in many cases, stories can combine all three purposes of informing, entertaining, and persuading to create a rhetorical juggernaut. Thanks for watching Words from the Muck. We value the writers behind the writing, so tell us some stories in the comments about something that you believe in and how you came to believe that. Thanks for liking and sharing our work, and please subscribe for more wordly wisdom. And until next time, farewell, good people.